the author of a book called By Accident. It's a memoir of letting go and the host of two different podcasts. One of them is called In the Story with Joanne Greene and All the F Words, which I love the title, co-hosted by a young lady by the name of Gabby Moskowitz. So welcome to the show, Joanne Greene. I'm so excited to have you here.
Well, thank you so much, Amanda Blackwood. I am thrilled to be here. I like nothing more than talking about survival.
Oh, and that's exactly what it is, too. You know, if we're here, we've got a story. So
we do.
Let's start from the very beginning of your story. Where were you born? Where were you raised? Where did you grow up?
Sure. I was born in Boston and raised just outside of Boston. I was the youngest of three, and I was the oops baby, which was a nice way of saying that I was an accident.
Mm-hmm.
Thus, the double meaning of By Accident, the title of my book. I never felt like I fit into my family at all. My mother, sister, and brother were all very linear thinkers. Everything was black and white. They were all math people. I was imaginative and a little wacky. So that's where and how I grew up. I was always trying to do things differently than what was expected of me. I was a performer, an actress, a writer. I made up stories, all of that. I'm just going to go quickly through my life. I ended up wanting to go as far away from home as possible. I was given a 1,000-mile limit for where I could go to college, and I chose Northwestern, just outside of Chicago, because it was 1,000 miles away. I ended up after college moving to San Francisco, where I got involved in radio and had a career in the 70s, 80s, and into the 90s in San Francisco radio, in jazz radio and then rock radio. And if you can imagine what was going on in rock radio in San Francisco in the 70s,
Gosh, yes.
you are right. That happened and more. And so I've got lots of crazy stories from that period of time. I always battled anxiety and depression. I had eating disorders before anybody really knew what they were. I was anorexic when I was 17 to 19. I weighed 73 pounds.
Oof.
And I know. And in those days, there was no field called eating disorders. So the kind of therapy that I had was, I'm lucky to be alive. So that was brush with death number one. Then I married a guy that I worked with in rock and roll radio. We've had a phenomenal life. We've been married for 43 years so far. 2 children. My career kept growing. I was someone who felt that I needed to continue to accomplish and achieve in order to be worthy of love. So I kept going and undertaking more challenges and adding more to my plate. And I had to be a perfect daughter and sister and mother and wife and employee and broadcaster. And then I also had to volunteer because I had to be, great at the schools and on and on and on. And what I learned many, many years ago is that overachieving women often brush things under the rug. And when we get into midlife and we have fewer resources because our bodies aren't producing as much estrogen, for instance, and we're starting to get bigger problems, aging parents, children acting out in different ways, we start tripping over all those things we buried under the rug. Literally tripping over them. So problems started to emerge. And the reason I wrote this book By Accident, I knew I'd write a book someday. I had that sense, but I didn't know what it would be. I had a 10-year period that was just monumental. I came out of a period, when the book begins, I'm coming out of a period where I had lost my mother, my sister, and my brother in a 4-year period. And I had lost my dad many years earlier. So this left me as the sole surviving member of my original family. And my siblings had children and grandchildren. And suddenly I went from being the baby of the family to being the matriarch.
Wow. And even losing one person in your family is traumatic, but you lost all of them.
Right. I still had a husband
Wow.
and children, and had many nephews and a niece, but I was very close, in particular with my mother and my sister, and those losses really brought me to my knees. And it happened at a time when I was already starting to have trouble with tripping over those things I'd swept under the rug. So coming out of that period, now it's like a year or two later, and I'm working full time at a job, of course, and I'm going a million miles an hour. And I'm leaving work to go home and watch the first debate. This is October 3rd, 2012, to go home and watch the debate between then candidate Barack Obama and Mitt Romney. And I'm crossing a street in a crosswalk in broad daylight. And I get in front of the car that has stopped for me. And I hear what sounds like an explosion and find myself airborne, thrown up onto the hood of a car. And that car is going out of control down the street with me on the hood. What felt like 10 minutes later, but was probably about 40 seconds later, I fell off the hood of the car onto the ground. And I knew that I was alive, and that's all I knew. I was in shock. I had been hit by a car as a pedestrian. And the thoughts that ran through my head in that initial impact, as I heard this enormous sound and felt motion, I didn't feel pain initially, was what? Now this? Like, really? God, universe, whatever? What the actual, right? And then a second later, maybe not even a second later, something deep inside me, and this is where the survivor comes in, Amanda. Something deep inside me said, all right, let's do this. Let's do this.
Yep. Time to
This is
get
not going to
serious.
get me. This is not going to get me. I have a life to live. I have a lot of people to take care of now after all these losses and whatever it's going to take.
Wow.
So that's where my book begins. It begins with the crash. I mean, I can read you the first line or two if you want. So you get a sense of.
Yes, I'd love that. That's a great idea.
As I step into the crosswalk, there's a sudden deafening sound, an explosion maybe. Then I'm airborne, thrown onto the hood of the car. What the hell? I silently scream to the universe or God or no one. Seriously? All I can hear is an ear-splitting cacophony. All I feel is wild, uncontrolled movement. Stop the car, stop the car. The car is catapulted down North San Pedro Road, my head banging against the windshield. I slip off the hood onto the ground alive. So that's how it starts. And the book is about what I learned when suddenly all control was ripped from me. I had tried to control absolutely everything in my life because it made me feel safer.
Right. Absolutely. The
You're
need for control is a trauma response.
totally. And my life had been a series of traumas.
Yeah.
And after this accident, 5 days in the hospital where I nearly bled out, internal injuries, 4 pelvic fractures,
Oof.
I came home and I could do nothing. I couldn't feed myself. I couldn't get to the bathroom. And I had to learn how to live in a very, very different way. And I did something, again, I don't know where this came from. I think somewhere deep in my DNA, maybe my ancestors who were immigrants, my grandparents, left the country they were from in order to flee persecution, in order to find economic opportunity. So I think I'm drawing upon their strength somehow. But I decided to make this, instead of a post-traumatic stress reaction, I was going to have post-traumatic growth. And I
love
did.
that.
And that's what my whole story is about. And that's what my book is about. And you can too. I say this to all of your listeners. You can too. We can learn things. We can learn to count our blessings. It sounds so trite, but when you sit and wallow in gratitude for what didn't happen or for what blessings you have in your life, it changes the paradigm entirely. And then there are many more lessons like that I share.
Wow. Well, and you talked about how you were tripping over the past experiences, tripping over the past traumas, because they do follow you. It's kind of like the cans on a string on a car after somebody just gets married. When you hit the brakes, they go right up underneath the car. That's what trauma does to us. It follows us around like a little can on a string. It never goes away. It's right there, and we have to figure out how to deal with it. So, what were your steps in figuring out how to deal with it? What did you use to be able to recover from all of this?
There was something my mom used to say to me, and I would always roll my eyes because I thought it was so lame. She would say, "This too shall pass." This is a really big one. And this works no matter if you're in physical pain, emotional pain, it works for grief. When you're feeling horrendous, like the worst feeling, and we've all been there, you feel like that's going to last forever. You feel like you are going to be stuck in that feeling forever. And if you continually tell yourself, this is a moment, this is this moment, and I don't have to do anything for the next moment to come, the next moment will be different. And it may be worse and it may be better, but it'll be different. So the sense of time and how time can be a healer was a big one for me. Also, a friend of mine said something great somewhere along the line one day when I was feeling really sorry for myself, because they told me that my recovery, first of all, they said, you'll never completely recover. Can I say bullshit on this podcast?
You can.
I fully recovered. I have zero residual damage. I hike mountains. I'm turning 70 in February. I do yoga. I have no pain, none. So don't necessarily believe them when they say that you're going to be stuck with X, Y, and Z, be it physical or emotional. It was going to be a 1.5 year recovery. Who can wrap their brain around a 1.5 years? I can understand 2 weeks, a 2-week recovery. I can imagine, but this was unimaginable. And my friend said to me, you know what, honey, you can visit the pity pot, but don't be packing your bags and moving in. And that one, for some reason, stuck with me. It was like cry, sob, scream, get it out, and then move on to the next, whatever it is, whatever the next thing is.
Yeah.
If it's feeling gratitude for something, great. If it's going back and having a great memory of something that happened years and years ago, do that. If it's fantasizing about something you want to do in the future, when things aren't so bad, when maybe you have the money to spend, or maybe you don't have whatever the encumbrance is that's holding you back right now, do that. So those were some of the techniques. And then I went to a very specific kind of therapist who, there are a number of different kinds of therapies that are good for trauma.
Right.
The one that I chose was somatic therapy, SOMATIC, and it very much operates under the notion that we hold trauma in certain parts of our body and they lodge there. And the point of this was for it not to lodge anywhere in my body. And in the very first session with my somatic therapist, and I only went to 9 sessions, so this was not a forever process. It was very beginning, middle, and end. Very first session, she got me into kind of a meditative state. I had to imagine myself stepping off the curb, and she wanted me to look to the right to see the truck that was coming that hit the car that hit me. I couldn't move my neck. She said, turn your neck slightly to the right. I could not move my neck. Amanda, nothing was wrong with my neck. I hadn't injured my neck. This was a manifestation of the trauma. Somehow the message had gotten into my brain and then into my body. The danger was coming from the right, so don't look there. By the end of that session, I had full range of motion in my neck.
Wow.
Sounds like a miracle, right?
That is cool. And I've heard of somatic therapy, but I've never heard anybody express their own experiences with this. That's fascinating.
There's a chapter on it in my book, so it is in by accident. Yeah. And then I ended up going back to her later on. I was, not to give a spoiler alert, but once I was better, my husband and I booked a vacation in Mexico and got caught in a Category 4 hurricane. Can't make that up. I mean, literally, like, it destroyed the airport. We had to be airlifted out 3 days later by the Mexican military. Crazy story.
Oh my
Two chap
gosh.
2 chapters in the book. I came back to work and I found myself snapping at people, and I realized, oh, I've reignited my trauma here. So I
Yeah.
went back to the somatic therapist, and she helped me again.
Wow. That is so cool. And who in your community or in your family was like the biggest person that was rooting you on and cheering you on and helpful throughout everything?
100% my husband.
No.
My husband lost both his parents in a car accident with a drunk driver when he was 7.
Oh my
Orphaned
gosh.
at 7. So getting the phone call that his wife had been hit by a car and was lying on the street awaiting the ambulance was the worst possible phone call he could have gotten.
Yeah.
He also never really was a caretaker ever.
Mm,
Um, I mean, I did that.
yeah.
I did that. So I took care of everybody. And so suddenly he had to completely step up to the plate and take care of me. And it was a lot. It was managing everything from my medications to my food to my physical therapy to the attorney to the doctors to the therapist to the people who brought food, because we have a very wonderful community, and when something happens to anybody, we all cook for each other, and the dog still had to be walked and the phone had to be answered and flowers were coming, and he totally rose to the occasion, and our marriage is better for it. We grew
Wow.
together as a couple.
That's cool. I don't know your husband, but I like him already.
Well, some people say that the book is a love letter to him.
Oh,
I don't know. I mean, he
no.
isn't perfect. None of us are perfect, but he's my bestie.
No, that's amazing. And speaking of your book, did you find that writing about all of this was really therapeutic and helpful too?
Yes, and a little re-traumatizing,
Yeah.
because I had to get really deep into and then we recorded it as an audiobook because my husband happens to be a recording engineer. So the book is available as an audiobook, and you don't just read it, you have to tell it. So you have to act it. So if you're feeling terrified, you have to sound terrified. So that was exhausting.
Yeah.
So I had to relive it all over again months after I had finished writing it,
Yeah.
and
Wow.
rewriting it and rewriting it and rewriting it a million times
Right.
with
Because,
editors.
yeah. And so many people don't realize that there is so much work that goes into writing a book. You don't just
Oh my
write it and
gosh.
go, oh, look, I'm done. There's so much more to it. Yeah. I just published book number 13 in June. And every single time I go through the editing, I do rewrites. I'm dyslexic, so I struggle with all of this. My editor goes through everything. She's incredible. There's a lot of work here. And when you're writing about something traumatic, you have to go over this with a fine tooth comb so many times that you are reliving it every single time.
And
Oh,
yet you learn new things.
yeah.
So I mean, the therapy was very helpful. The writing for me throughout my life has always been really helpful. I just didn't share it with anybody. I have
Yeah.
journals dating back to the 8th grade,
Wow.
drawers filled with journals. And I mean, some of them are funny now to go back and read them, but I've had the same issues all my life. We do. We have the same issues. We spend our whole life going back and, you know, having to make the same mistakes again and again. But I have found that the older I've gotten, the more I've accepted myself. And that's kind of step one. You have to self-love is critical.
Yeah.
And then you have to surround yourself with people who will make you better.
Yeah.
So I've done some of that too, because some of us have a temptation to follow the bad guys.
Oh, absolutely. Been there, done that. Married to a
Wrote the
great guy.
book.
Yeah. 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 Literally. So who do you find your most inspiration from?
That's a great question. I get it. I don't have one person. I get some of it from this person, some of it from that person, some from my two sons who are grown. They're 37 and 40 now. I have two grandchildren. I get a lot of inspiration from them because they're pure and nothing has corrupted them yet. So it's pure energy. The epilogue of my book is just one little moment a few years after the book ends. And my granddaughter is running through my backyard and the music of Frozen is playing, let it go, let it go. And I realized, oh my God, that's what I just wrote a book about, letting it go. And she just, by virtue of being free, creatively, artistically, and in all ways, and is so loved and cared for that she doesn't have to learn to let it go. It happens automatically.
Oh, that's
So
gorgeous.
even a 3-year-old inspired me.
How many grandkids do you have now?
2 and another one on the way.
I
From
have.
my older son, who at 41 will become a dad for the first time.
Oh my. So my husband and I are expecting his daughter and her husband to have their first child this December.
Oh, so wonderful. You can't imagine. I mean, it's the greatest joy, absolutely the greatest joy in life. And then you get to hand them back.
Oh yeah, spin them up and hand them back and let mom take care of all the cries. So
Can I
talk
give
to
you
me.
some advice? I want to
Please.
just give you some
Yes,
advice,
always.
grandmother to future grandmother. You don't get a say in how this child is raised. You just pay attention to how they're doing it and you do it their way. And you only offer a suggestion when your advice is asked for. Okay, that's
Yes.
all I want to say.
Yeah, that's perfect. I need to share this with my husband. It's going to be a lot more of a struggle for him. So he's very set in his ways and he likes things done a particular way, and that's going to be hard for him. So talk to me a little bit about your two podcasts. I am just enthralled with what it is that you're doing. I want to get the word out there about your podcast and get you some more listeners if possible.
Well, I am very excited about In This Story with Joanne Greene. It is a very short podcast. So for those of us with short attention spans or super busy lives, and we don't have time necessarily to listen to long podcasts, they are my micro essays, but they're fully produced with music that's custom that my husband does. So it's a collaboration, and some of them are funny, some of them are nostalgic. For instance, one of them is how to relate to adult children and its advice. They're all different. I wrote a piece about school lunches. I wrote a piece about being present at the death of my 101-year-old aunt and the holiness of that moment and being able to help her into the whatever. So that's called In This Story. Very different. All the F words, which I co-host with another writer, 30 years younger than me. So it's a 2-generational take on all different issues that start with the letter F. And there are a zillion issues that start with the letter F. We never run out. Fanaticism. Oh my God. Feng shui, fake meat, family functions, friendship. I mean, they're just endless. And again, some very serious, some more funny. And one of us does a lot of research. So we have kind of the latest information and articles, and we have all of that in the show notes if you want to do a deeper dive into that topic. But also just our life experiences have been so different coming from 2 different generations. That we share personal experiences that have to do with whatever the topic is.
Oh, that's awesome. That's very cool. And Joanne, when people are looking for your book, I'm assuming that they can probably find it on your website, which is www.joanne with an E green with an E.com.
Absolutely. They can also find it certainly on Amazon, Barnes & Noble, all the basic online sites, and your local bookseller will order it for you because it's got broad distribution. So it's called By Accident, A Memoir of Letting Go. See, I always
Awesome.
get that. There it is, right there.
And I will make sure that I have all of your links and everything in the show notes. Also, your Instagram, your LinkedIn, your Facebook, your website, all this stuff, so people can go and find out more about your story and listen to your podcast. I'm excited about listening to your podcast, honestly.
Thank you. And I write back to everyone. So if you write to me, I write back.
Oh, I love people like you. You're so genuine. This is what we need more of in the world. You're energetic and fun and genuine, and you are the perfect embodiment of a true survivor.
Thank you so much.
You're awesome. Let's see. A couple more questions for you. One super easy one. Are you an introvert or an extrovert? And have you always been
Total
that way?
extrovert. Total extrovert. Always been that way.
Nice.
Always been that way. I've actually had to learn to spend time alone and to figure out what to do, because I would fill every single minute. And if I have a spare second, I call somebody, because I just love people and I want to talk to people. And I especially love dogs and children.
Oh, so cool. And how do you celebrate your wins in life?
How do I celebrate my wins? I try to be humble, first and foremost. Gratitude, gratitude, and more gratitude. And I love food, and I love a good margarita, and I love taking incredible hikes in nature. I love girlfriends. I couldn't survive without girlfriends. I love people. So all of those ways. A good dinner with a glass of wine is a wonderful thing for me.
Oh, I think it is for a lot of us.
And I dance. I love to dance. I love to rock out. Can I tell you? I have to tell you the funniest thing. My 2.5-year-old grandson, Axel, towhead, white blonde hair. I took him out of the bath the other night, and he calls me Yo-Yo. He goes, Yo-Yo, want to have a dance party? He's 2.5. I said, you know it. And we got him into his diaper and his PJs, and we put on I'm a Banana. He chose that song. Alexa, play I'm a Banana. And we rocked out like there was no tomorrow.
Oh, that's so wonderful. I can't wait to start doing that with grandbabies. I'm not much of a dancer, but with a grandbaby, it's worth it. I would risk the bruises. So I have another podcast that I co-host with a friend of mine from Tasmania, Australia. And she's really big into dancing. When she's got a win in life, that is her main thing to do. She'll put on a favorite song and she will just boogie out like nobody's watching. And she lives alone. So generally, there really is nobody watching. There was one day not too long ago where she was dancing around. She hit the floor just the wrong way, just the wrong angle, and she fell and bruised the entire side of her body. And she said, now I'm really glad nobody was watching. Got up, brushed herself off, and went back to dancing.
That's what we survivors do.
Absolutely.
Absolutely is right.
So, my very last question is always my favorite question of the episode. And depending on what day I'm catching you on, the answer will always be different. So, think about this in your own time sometime too. What is one thing that you truly love about yourself that's not related to your physical appearance?
Optimism. My cup is always half full, or more than half full. It's just overflowing. And I know that there's always something brighter coming down the pike.
If you've enjoyed tonight's episode, please make sure you check out the episode description. You'll find links there on how you can learn more about this guest, links to connect with them on social media, and how to support the podcast. Remember, I don't get paid to do this. My boss is a bit tight-fisted, but I can say that. I work for myself.